Well, hello and welcome to the Tennis Podcast. And Valentin Vacherot has just written the words, "What's going on the lens of the camera after reaching the quarterfinals. And I dare say if he'd have been asked the question a year ago, where do you think you'll be a year from now? He probably would have wondered what on earth's going on. But he's into the quarterfinals in Monte Carlo, and he is one of a few people we have to talk about on this special midweek show here of the Tennis Podcast with me, David Law, and Matt Roberts, and no Catherine Whitaker, who is on a night out. Which is absolutely fine. But this is a special show, Matt. You know, we're going to do a few more of these. And mainly because there's just too much going on some weeks to cover it all in the one show. And actually, it feels like a really good time to be doing this because that was indeed quite a scene.
Yeah, what's going on feels like the definitive Valentin Vacherot question, really, doesn't it? Like, we all knew him from this tournament. You know, he was always in the draw in Monte Carlo, not doing an awful lot, and then suddenly has that run in Shanghai and is backing it up really, really well, I have to say. And 2 nights in a row, we've had late night Vacherot scenes in Monte Carlo, and he's whipping the crowd up and playing with such intensity, and yeah, it's been a really good time.
Yeah, and in fact, it's a really good tournament every year. This one, isn't it, Monte Carlo? I think. And what's nice, I mean, we're going to be talking about all the players that have reached the quarterfinals. They'll all be played tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the Linz tournament, which is now played on indoor clay for the first time, and that also feels like a good development. I don't know. Suddenly this week, I always get the one frustration for me about Monte Carlo is that it is men only, and now a little bit like next week when we have Stuttgart and Barcelona on the women's side and the men's side, you feel like you've actually got a really good tournament to talk about. I know it's not as high level and it's not as many top players, but it feels a bit more complete to me this week. How do you feel about that?
I think I'm holding judgment on that until we see Linz without Lilli Tagger, because I do feel like Lilli Tagger might be carrying Linz and our enjoyment of Linz so far. I don't know, but that's
Fair.
That's my hunch. I have really enjoyed it, but I've enjoyed it because of her and, you know, the scenes and the crowd support that she's getting. But I don't know, like, I would love for them to do with Monte Carlo what they've done with Queens, you know, and make it a men and women event. But I don't think the venue is big enough to be able to hold both at the same time over the same week. So hold them in back-to-back weeks. I think that would be fantastic. You know, like, I often get asked, like, why I like tennis so much, and I often talk about sort of just how pleasing it is on the senses. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love the sights and the sounds of it, and sometimes that's hard to justify when, you know, it's being played in a sort of car park in the middle of the night and no one's watching it. But I feel like Monte Carlo is the event I will point to in terms of those sights and sounds being so stimulating and pleasing to watch. And yeah, it's been like that all week. I do love it.
Yeah. Well, more on Valentin Vacherot a little bit later. More on the Lilli Tagger Open as well later in the pod. This is, as I said, a 2-pod week. 3 if you count the one we did for Friends of the Tennis Podcast last night, which is our monthly live Q&A on YouTube for Friends of the Tennis Podcast subscribers. If you want to listen or watch that, you can. If you're not a friend already, go to tennis.supportingcast.fm and you can become a friend and get access to all of our bonus content like live Q&As and Tennis Relived. We've got another one of those coming up soon. I did an interview for it today. We'll announce the details of that very soon. I'm looking forward to that one. But we've got to start with Monte Carlo, Matt, in some detail, because you know, we have only had 3 or 4 days, but it feels like already, lots and lots has happened, And yet, B, a little bit like with the Masters Golf, which you and I are also watching. There's kind of a leaderboard, a packed leaderboard feel to the quarterfinals. You know, all the big names are still there, and we're left with a Friday that is going to be absolute must viewing, isn't it? And yet, even before we come on to talk about Alcaraz and Sinner and Zverev and all the players that are going to feature in that, we got to start with Daniil Medvedev, who didn't win a single game in the tournament. I mean, it's hard to believe that the guy we watched play outlandishly good tennis in Indian Wells and made me feel as though he was going to win the final against Sinner. He ended up losing it in 2 close tie-break sets, but he was playing vintage Medvedev tennis as well as I could imagine him playing, and it took everything Sinner had got to beat him. For that guy to lose 6-love to Matteo Berrettini yesterday, and it was the talk of tennis, it was the talk of a lot of the sporting world. I was having lots of people I don't often hear from about tennis asking me about this moment. My son said, "What happened to Medvedev?" You know, he doesn't usually sort of ask questions like that unless I happen to have it on. But you know, it had been across all his weird and wonderful feeds that he sort of follows. But you know, the reason is because he didn't win a game. And he smashed his racket in a more spectacular fashion than anybody I've seen smash it this year, and in fact maybe more spectacular than I've seen anybody ever. It's right up there anyway, top 5 most extraordinary racket smashes. But what happened to him from your perspective? Was Matteo Berrettini incredible, or was Daniil Medvedev appalling?
Sorry to Matteo Berrettini, but I feel confident that the answer is Medvedev was appalling. I mean, talk about like biggest discrepancy between the top level of someone we've seen recently and the bottom level. Because as you said, he looked so good in Indian Wells, and he's looked good at various points this season. You know, Brisbane, Dubai. Albeit, I do think we've noted in quick conditions. He's been helped by the conditions when he's played well this year. And obviously, we know that clay is his least favourite surface and time of year. My expectations of Medvedev were not that high going into this clay court season, even after the good start to the season he'd had. But I did not expect this. I mean, this was just terrible, just like the crash out of all crash outs. The racket smash was pretty comical, really. The way that the crowd were goading him and doing the ooh hey when he was smashing the racket, like. And he just lost his head so early in this one. Like, he had a break point in the first game, didn't take it. And when he went 5-love down, he was sarcastically fist pumping over to his team. And like, that's such a telltale sign for Medvedev that he's probably about to kind of spin out of control. Personally, I prefer it if he's taking it out on his racket than we often see, and he takes it out on an umpire or something like that. It's kind of ugly, and you don't really like that, and you can't really justify it. I was watching this, and I was, on the one hand, feeling for him. He was having a horrible day. He couldn't find the court. 3 winners to 27 unforced errors in this match. But on the other, I was kind of finding it quite funny because there was that sort of comical element to it and the racket smash. And once it got to, a set and a break, you were kind of thinking, well, the double bagel is definitely on here. And, Berrettini did well. He didn't make the errors. He played solidly. But this was, I think, pretty much all about how bad Medvedev was.
Yeah, the comedy element to it. I mean, there were a number of elements that made it feel like that. One was when he was 6-love, 1-love down, and he won the first point of the 8th game, and Thomas Johansson, who's his coach, who's in the corner there, trying really hard to sort of help him find a way into the match, help him get his mind in the right place. He said, "That's the way." move the feet now, stay there. Like he didn't want him to back off. Use the feet now. Okay, he lost the next 3 points. And he just couldn't put the ball in the court reliably at all. He just couldn't play properly. And when he did smash this racket, I mean, one of them. I mean, I think there were about 7 smashes in total in the one racket sequence. The first one was him throwing it into the backboard, which always makes me wince because I'm always expecting a ball kid to just appear out of nowhere and just get it in the leg or something. So there's a recklessness to that sort of thing. But then when the crowd started to get involved, you got the sense that he was in on the joke almost.
Yeah.
He knows how terrible he's playing. He knows how kind of ridiculous it all is that a top player would be playing like this and losing like this, and he sort of went with the joke. And I almost got the sense that he was thinking, I'd rather lose love and love now because it's at least funny, or at least ridiculous once he got to a certain point. I mean, it was when you said you found it funny, and I mean there was a moment where after the last smash, the racket was in so many pieces, he was able to sort of just manipulate it into a shape that it fit into the little sort of letterbox entry to the bin, and he was just able to just pop it in the bin in pieces, no trouble at all. I mean, I know some people think, crikey, somebody could have used that racket. There's lots of people who don't have a racket. Not a great look, all this sort of thing. So usually I don't mind too much racket smashes, and this one I really did find funny, and it was amusing. It amused me. I didn't have any problem with it at all. And like you, I just don't like the going at umpires when it's not their fault. And they're human beings. They're there to do a job. You're playing like an idiot. Get over it, mate. I mean, I thought it was all a bit pathetic, but I also thought, this is a guy who's just lost. He's just lost. He's not lost the match. He's lost his mind. He's lost his way completely. There's no way back here. And yet I would back him probably to rebound. Okay. I mean, I think the bigger problem is clay. He can play on it, can't he? I mean, is it Rome he's won? That's a proper clay court tournament. How on earth is he losing like this? But I still think that, I don't think this is just going to keep happening necessarily.
No, nor do I. And I think in some ways he can probably just write this off as a terrible day and probably not think too deeply about it and know that he's going to play better the next time he steps on the court. I mean, this was a historically bad performance. Like, it wasn't sort of any kind of trend or anything. It was a total outlier. He just could not play. Like, he couldn't serve. He only won, I think, 9 points on serve all match. His first serve percentage was so low. I think he just writes this off, moves on, and as I said, I'm not expecting him to win events on clay. I'm not really expecting him to be in the semis of these Masters 1000s or slams on clay. I expect him to win some matches, and I think he'll probably do that. I think he's probably got quite used to in the last year or so of having a dip and then having to come back and play better. And Madrid in those faster conditions at altitude, I think will suit him more. And if he gets a decent draw, then I would back him to at least win a match, or certainly a game.
So to this point, Matteo Berrettini had won, was it 16 games out of 16 because his previous opponent had retired for all of town. But his Monte Carlo Open didn't last too much longer because he then ran into Joao Fonseca today and lost 6-3, 6-2. And Fonseca now into the quarterfinals, having beaten Diallo, the Canadian, Artur Rindiknesh, and then Berrettini. And he's we've seen him play well on clay before in South America. Okay, he didn't win the French Open, as I said he would last year, but I've come back again with another go at it, and I've made a big play for him in my fantasy team, trading in Taylor Fritz to Reggie, and I've got Joao Fonseca, and here he is in the quarterfinals. But he's starting to look the property on this surface, I think, that maybe we were looking towards a year ago. I still think he's got a long way to go, but these are good strides in Monte Carlo.
Yeah, big time. I think it's, first of all, good to see him looking healthy. You know, that's still on my mind every time I watch him, considering the injury he had at the start of the season, and he strung, as you said, 3 wins together there. I sort of picked this match up in the second set today. I was watching Zverev Bergs, but as is often the case at these events, I was drawn to the noise I could hear from the other courts, you know, and like the Italian tennis boon has been such a boost to Monte Carlo as well, you know, like pretty much on the border there, and like you get such good atmospheres at all the Italian matches, and of course you get good atmospheres at Fonseca matches. So Fonseca Berrettini, I don't know why I didn't start with that match, to be honest. Like obviously that was kind of going to be the more sort of compelling one from an atmosphere perspective, but I was impressed with Fonseca. You know, they sort of traded breaks at the start of that second set. Berrettini had an awful forehand miss to go a break down 2-3, but Fonseca just like kept his foot on the gas and like finished it off really impressively. And I think when you have that much power at your disposal, like he does on clay, and you have time on the ball, it's kind of easier to unleash that power. It's harder to be rushed, and even the opponents knowing that he's got all that much power, I think they naturally sort of back off a little bit against him, and he ends up with a lot more space to use in the court. I think his game does make a lot of sense on this surface, but I do think it's going to be very interesting seeing him play against Zverev tomorrow, because today against Berrettini, he had quite an easy strategy of kicking the serve into the Berrettini backhand return and knowing that he's going to get kind of a mid-court ball to attack off, and he can then dictate. That kicker into Zverev's backhand return isn't going to, I don't think, give him such an easy ball as it did against Berrettini. It's going to be harder for him to just set up the rallies that he wants, I think. I don't by any means think Zverev's playing all that well in Monte Carlo so far, and it's always a test for a player. Can they put Zverev away? But yeah, I think it's exciting that he's got that test. You know, we've seen him play Sinner, we've seen him play Alcaraz, and now we see him play Zverev. This is all just good, I think, for the Fonseca experience and growth.
Yeah, I agree with that, because this is the first year he's played those guys, and he's never played Zverev before. Zverev having beaten Christian Garin in his opening match from 4-love down in the deciding set and 5-2 down as well. And I mean, Garin had qualified for this tournament. He'd won a very handy first round against Matteo Rinaldi, and he was playing really well. He was rolling back the years, quite honestly. And he's beaten Zverev before, and he was causing him all sorts of trouble. Actually, I would say he was causing him the sort of trouble that should give Fonseca some hope, because the damage was coming from the forehand side from Garin, albeit he was doing most of it with a cross-court forehand into the Zverev forehand, and Zverev wasn't enjoying the way that ball was jumping up at his forehand. And like you said, I don't think he's found his real timing yet. He was much better today against Zizou Bergs, although I thought Bergs was disappointing after a brilliant performance against Andrei Rublev to get there. I was expecting a lot from Bergs today, and he couldn't time a forehand all day.
Yeah, and I realised that we were so close to a Garin Bergs match, which was the which was the one in the Davis Cup last year
Yes,
that caused all that controversy
I'd
when
forgotten that.
Berg sort of barged into Green accidentally. I was kind of rooting for that to happen, and yeah, Green I think definitely should have won that match. He got very tight and loose and started shanking the ball, and yeah, Zverev worked his way back in it, but Zverev has said before, hasn't he, that he does feel like clay is the surface that takes him the longest to get going on. You know, I think that was part of
Right.
the reason why he played in South America last year, to try and get up to speed on the clay so that he'd sort of hit the ground running on the European clay. It didn't work at all. It was a disaster. He lost a lot in South America. I think he ended up sort of putting too much load on his back, and he was then sort of injured through that period, and it just didn't work. And he's obviously abandoned that strategy this year. But if you look at his record on clay over the years, he does take a little while to get going. I think he is right there. Like, he's never had a great record in Monte Carlo, but by the time Rome and Roland Garros and Madrid come around, he's normally hit his stride a bit more on this surface. But I do think he's there for the taking at the moment. I mean, we say that a lot about Zverev, and actually being able to beat him is difficult. He does grind his way through a lot of these matches, so it's going to be a real test for Fonseca. But I do think if we see Zverev playing like he has so far, I do think Fonseca can do it.
That's going to be fascinating. That's the first matchup tomorrow as we come to you on Thursday. And the winner of Fonseca and Zverev will face the winner of Jannik Sinner and Felix Auger-Aliassime. That's the second match that's on in the quarterfinals. Sinner, who's been on this incredible run, having won the Sunshine Double, and he'd won 37 sets in a row, finally lost one. Because at a Masters tournament, that is, because he lost the second set against Thomas Mahatch on a tiebreak. He very nearly turned it around, having been 5-2 down, and managed to win that one as well, but didn't get it. Seemed to feel a little unwell in the second set. Sinner, not exactly something we're a stranger to really with him, but he's into the quarterfinals. How have you sort of taken in his first couple of matches on clay so far, Jannik Sinner?
It's a strange one today. Like, he was really good to start, and Mahatch was flat and disappointing from the start. It was one of those performances. Like, I still fall into the trap. I still get a little bit excited every time I see him on the order of play. And, I think, oh, what if the jumping forehand goes in today? And what if the wrong shot selection comes off today? That's always
He
there.
hit one, didn't he? He hit one jumping forehand that Jannik Sinner had to jump over on the baseline.
Yeah. And look, he was so bad to start. I think he dragged Sinner down with him in that second set. And then Sinner, yeah, he said he started feeling dizzy. He also said he started feeling a bit sick, but that he wasn't worried about that. It was the dizziness that he was worried about, and he took some pills for that. He seemed to be clutching his back a little bit as well. And yeah, 5-2 down, double break, and ailing really. And you're thinking, okay, maybe there's a match here. Of course, Mahatch was pretty shambolic when trying to serve out that second set twice. He came up with just awful shot making, but then really got it together in the tiebreak and played a great tiebreak. He ripped it from Sinner, but I still didn't actually think Mahatch was going to go on and win it because, as you said, we're quite used to seeing Sinner in those situations. He handles them well. He stays calm, when he's not quite feeling his best. And I thought he served a lot better in that final set and kept Mahatch at arm's length. And if it is just a slight illness thing, then I think he was kind of saying, well, I'll hopefully feel better in my next match tomorrow. So I think you'd have to say it's a good match for him to get through. And yeah, he would definitely be the favourite to come through that bottom half of the draw for me.
Auger-Aliassime is a player that has beaten Sinner before, but clay is clearly the least preferred surface for Auger-Aliassime. He got a win today over Casper Ruud, who pulled his calf muscle sadly in the second set and retired whilst a set and 2-all in the second. But I mean, he was playing pretty well, Auger-Aliassime, wasn't he, to stay with Ruud up until that point. I think he went 3-love down immediately, but then got it back and eventually took that first set. I'm still interested to see this match. Sometimes I'll watch Jannik Sinner matches, and I have to say I did put this one on the list today of thinking. I really struggle to see it being competitive. So fair play to Match that he actually won the second set, although perhaps it was due to the physical state of Sinner. But I am interested to see. I think Auger-Aliassime provides at least a physical test. I think he's got that clear deficiency on the backhand versus a guy with a backhand like Sinner's. But, he's got the movement, he's got a big forehand, he's got a big serve. I think it's another little tester just to see where Sinner is. I think at a tournament, I expect you to have these incremental tests because you're going through the rounds and you should be meeting the best players towards the end. And Sinner, Auger-Aliassime as a quarter-final is a good little marker, I think. But I'd be surprised if Auger-Aliassime would have won this one. Would you?
Yeah, me too. They played a good match at the US Open. That semi-final was pretty good last year. Auger-Aliassime brought it and did manage to get the forehand into play quite a lot. And the backhand held up, I think. But yeah, I have the same concerns for you as you for him in that matchup. And I would expect Sinner to come through.
Mm. So that's the bottom half of the draw. Fonseca, Zverev, and Sinner, Auger-Aliassime. We're going to do predictions at the end of all this, folks. Of course we are.
David's
but first, absolutely. I haven't got Catherine to roll her eyes at me, just trying to make polls out of everything, and goodness knows what. And I miss Catherine, so I'm gonna make it up to myself by just throwing loads of predictions around. Alcaraz is also through, but like Sinner, he lost a set today. Did Carlos Alcaraz against Thomas Etcheverry, which you would not have seen that coming after the first set, would you? Because he was absolutely majestic against Etcheverry. I watched all of this, and he looked absolutely bang on it in the first set. And yet, if you think of Carlos Alcaraz, I've seen this match so many times. I've seen him come bursting out of the blocks, and you think he's the best player I've ever seen. And then in the second set, he's 4-1 down. And you're like, how have you ended up in this position? and I'm like, Etcheverry hasn't really been that involved. And yet he finds himself leading the second set. He ends up edging it in the end because Alcaraz left himself too much to do despite making a bit of a comeback. Got himself back on track in the third, won it fairly convincingly, 6-3. I didn't hear anything about any ill health or concerns of that type from Carlos Alcaraz. Maybe you'll tell me different, but to me this was not an unfamiliar sight either for Carlos Alcaraz in these sort of events.
No, I agree. I mean, he went through a spell last year, didn't he? I mean, even the start of this year, where he did put that sort of set behind him a little bit. He was super consistent through matches, but we do seem to be back to the full Alcaraz experience with these sort of lapses in a set. And I think Etcheverry's really good clay court, isn't he? Solid. Catherine said the other day, all these Argentinians come out on the clay, and he's one of them. He is tough, and I think he broke down the Alcaraz backhand really in that second set. The stats flashed up that Alcaraz had hit so many errors off that wing. I think it was 16 at one point in the sort of latter stages of that second set, compared to just a couple for Etcheverry. And it was interesting having the audio on the back and forth between Alcaraz and his coaching team. And Alcaraz I think of him as like the belief guy, like when he was asked about how he still managed to beat Zverev in Australia when he was cramping, he was like, well, I just believed that I would win. And that seems to sort of always be there. And yet, picking up on this microphone today, he was really talking about a loss of confidence, and he was having to be reassured a lot by his camp. They were like, you're making mistakes, you're going to make mistakes, but you've got to just keep trying things and trust yourself, and it will come. It was a really good sort of reassuring message, I think. And yeah, he battled hard to get an early break in that third set, didn't he? And you could see he really celebrated that pretty hard. I think he knew that was important, just to get off to a good start in that third set in the way that he hadn't in the second. And yeah, I don't know. Like, is this a? It's kind of the question we've been having all year. Is this like good for the field or bad for the field? Is this a good day for the field that Sinner lost the set and looked a bit vulnerable, and Alcaraz hit 24 unforced errors in a second set and looked a bit vulnerable? Or is it a bad day because those things happened and yet they still won, and you kind of always thought they would still win? Like, it takes so much for someone to be able to beat one of them. And, even with all those things going on, they came through.
Yeah, I think it's a bad thing. Because I don't think they're going to get any worse.
Right.
I think they're going to get better. But anyway, Alcaraz is through. He will now face Alexander Bublik, who had a pretty handy win today against Yuri Lehechka. And this is interesting, isn't it? Because have they ever played each other? I don't remember seeing Alcaraz against Bublik before.
I heard Alcaraz's post-match interview, and he was saying they've sort of practiced together quite a lot, but not played. And he was like, let's see who has the best drop shot.
Yeah, it is their first meeting. I mean, that is fascinating, and I wonder whether Bublik might be able to draw him into one of those matches that Alcaraz sometimes gets himself involved in, where he just can't help but try to find out who's got the better swag and touch at the net, and when actually he probably just needs to put the hammer down and not get involved in all that stuff.
Yeah, but it also, to me, feels like kind of a big match for Bublik. Like, he needs to show up in one of these. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, he had that match against de Minaur where suddenly, like, spotlight's on him. He had that match against Sinner at the French last year. Okay, these are tough opponents in big matches in slams. But I think everyone is looking at that tomorrow, that quarterfinal, thinking, okay, that could be exciting. That could be a show. And I just think Bublik has not quite brought it in some of these matches recently against the best players since he's really had his rise. He's become consistent, and he is a threat on all surfaces, but I don't know, he's laid some eggs, and I just want to see him show something tomorrow. I think, in that matchup.
He does that thing when he plays Sinner. I know he has beaten Sinner, but he's also done that thing occasionally of getting behind and then almost bailing out mentally and giving himself an out, giving himself an excuse by saying this guy's an alien, he's an AI. I can't face this guy. I'm a normal person. I can't play this guy. And I don't actually expect him to do that against Alcaraz, because I think that
matchup, isn't it?
It is. Sinner is just so relentless, and Alcaraz, he can be, but he can also be a little indulgent or a little bit erratic. So it'll be very interesting to see who ends up coming through with Alcaraz and Bublik, and the winner of that one will face either Valentin Vacherot, who we have just seen in pretty chaotic scenes under the lights late on, beating Hubert Hurkacz. I mean, Vacherot's going to face de Minaur, and if Vacherot's got anything left after the last two matches he's had in Monte Carlo, I'll be impressed, because emotionally he's so on the edge, isn't he, at the moment? I mean, he's putting every bit of sweat and energy and emotion into winning these matches in front of his home crowd and the royalty in the stands, and he's got all his family there, it feels like, and all of his team, and he makes you feel things even if you've never seen him before. You can't fail to feel things when you watch Valentin Vacherot, because he looks like it means everything to him, and it can't possibly go right, and he's still going to throw his body to the dogs in an effort to try. And then he'll blow it, and he'll hit a smash straight back to Hubert Hurkacz, and then his girlfriend will just say the F word under her breath, and it's just so obvious what's happening. And then he wins, and then he's on his knees, and his arms are aloft, and he's a great addition, I think, to the circuit, to the tour, and I'm impressed that he's still at this stage of this tournament that means so much to him. Quarterfinals in his kind of follow-up season to the breakout after that Shanghai win. It's impressive, but I don't know, do you think he's going to have enough left to face de Minaur?
Well, I mean, that was such a defining feature of his run in Shanghai, the number of long matches he won. And, remember Shanghai last year was this incredibly hot, grueling tournament, wasn't it? People were falling by the wayside, and Vacherot just kept going. But I suppose, he would have had days off, but probably between matches, certainly between some of them in that longer format. Here, it's the relentlessness of having to come back the next day, and as you said, the emotional energy of it all as well. And kind of in these 1 week Masters events, which again, another great aspect of Monte Carlo, you do get like stuck in the schedule slot that you're in, so he's now on late every day because that's the slot he's in. And it does mean that the crowd has thinned out a bit. I think, as you were saying, it gets pretty chilly in Monte Carlo in the evenings. It takes a sort of at this time of year, it takes a hardy or slightly crazy tennis fan to kind of still be there in their seats after so many hours. And then that just creates this atmosphere of bedlam. And he has leaned into that. And he's, I think in his first match against Majerchak, there was a lot of people there in nose strips. And then in his last two matches, he's had this sort of young group of fans all wearing Monaco football shirts supporting him, and he's been whipping them up and getting them to make a lot of noise, and it has just created this kind of frenzy in his matches, and he's leaned into that. But you do feel like it must be taking quite a lot out of him and draining him, and to then have to play kind of the road runner de Minaur, who is going to be a physical test. If we're making predictions at this stage, I'm probably going de Minaur, even though clay is not his favourite surface. But yeah, it's been really fun watching Vacherot, and I'm glad that he's having this moment at his home tournament. The one that he said he would love to win it, kind of above everything else. I am a bit worried about Musetti though, who he beat in the previous round. I feel like he's on another nightmare tour, David. I feel like he's come into this clay court season. I mean, he must be defending the second most amount of points after Alcaraz, and he's got no matches and no form. And I think he feels the pressure of trying to defend all those points. I almost feel like he needs to go
runner-up last year, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and he reached the semis in Madrid and Rome and Roland Garros. He's got so many points to defend. I almost feel like he needs to drop down a level and play a 250 or a 500 and try and get some wins, because he's such a confidence player, Musetti. He needs to be sharp, and he's not at the moment. And Vacherot really exploited that.
I desperately hope for his sake he's not thinking about points though, because
but I think he might be. I feel like when I'm watching him, I feel like there's a burden on him.
To me, he should be accepting, look, last year was last year. Let's just see what I can do this year on its own merits. And like you say, I think dropping down a level or playing as many as he can in the next couple of weeks would be to his benefit, just to build some match toughness in the legs and to get some rhythm going. Because, I mean, I think the thing with him though, he's so comfortable on the surface generally, and he's so good at it that I do think he can build his way into this clay court season still. As long as
Yeah.
he's physically okay, I hope he can. Dimonor, by the way, a winner over Cameron Norrie in the previous round, and then Alexander Bloks, the young Belgian qualifier who he beat 7-5, 7-6 today, did Alex Dimonor. Such a tough competitor, Dimonor, and he hasn't had the best of times recently, so I'm pleased that he's picked it up and he's going well on the clay. So that leaves us with the quarterfinal lineup then, Matt. It's punchy predictions time. We're going to go from the top of the draw to the bottom. Alcaraz, Bublik, who's winning?
Alcaraz.
Alcaraz as well for me. Vacherot, Dimonor.
Dimonor.
I agree. Fonseca, Zverev.
I'm going to go Fonseca.
I'll say Zverev. Sinner, Auger-Aliassime.
Sinner.
And we're going to have a final of?
Well, I sort of cast some doubt over it the other day when we were talking, are we going to get our first Alcaraz Sinner of the season? But I don't know, looking at this lineup and those predictions I've made, I'm going to row back on that, and I'm going to go Alcaraz Sinner.
Me too. And who's going to win?
Going to go Alcaraz.
Yeah, same as us. I think the same. Okay, well, there we are. That's Monte Carlo. We're going to talk about Linz in part 2, but that's the end of part 1. We'll be back with Linz chat and Lilli Tagger in a minute. Well, welcome back to part 2 of the tennis podcast, and the tournament in Linz, which is a city I had the pleasure of visiting over the Christmas period. Absolutely beautiful city, loved it there. And I didn't actually go to the tennis arena where they hold this event. I wish I had, but it was only down the road from the hotel I was staying in. It used to be played in the autumn, I think, didn't it, for a while, indoors. It's kind of moved around a little bit, and now they've put a clay court inside it. And I know that indoor clay is maybe not your favourite, Matt, but I have to say, I think as a setting, this looks like a good court in a good location, and I definitely prefer it to the indoor hard court surface and field that I've seen previously. And it's got this relevance now because it's part of the clay court season. It's part of a swing leading to a Grand Slam. I'm personally in favour generally.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you there. I think if I'm ranking everything, I'm like outdoor tends to be at the top, but clay tends to be at the top. So if you're going to have indoor, if it's on clay, I probably do prefer that to indoor hard. It's just a bit weird to me, having indoor clay, but I don't mind it. And as you said, narratively, it does make sense, especially given that, we do have a big WTA event on indoor clay coming up. You've now got like a 2-week period where they're on the indoor clay. That wouldn't be like my preferred choice for how to start the clay court season for the women, but if they're going to do it, maybe make it like a little swing like they have. And yeah, it's been good. It's I think that main court looks good on the telly. It's a nice shot. It's a nice camera angle. And yeah, as you said, the Lilli Tagger Open. I mean, that has just been a joy to watch her couple of matches so far this week.
Well, tell us about her. She's 18 years of age. She's beaten Paula Badosa and she's beaten Ludmila Samsonova today in some quite extraordinary scenes. Samsonova had 8 set points in the second set of this match. And, I mean, you're quite right. This tournament is energised by the fact that they have a home player to support and that the place is just jumping with people. And I must admit, I didn't hang on to see the Pliskova-Alexandrova match that followed, which Pliskova won in 2 handy sets. But I've seen a lot of Lilli Tagger. But I mean, just give, for people that haven't come across her, give us an idea of why we have been texting back and forth a lot about her over the last week?
It's the backhand, isn't it, David? Let's be honest. Let's be honest. We are immediately drawn to the backhand. And I think even people that aren't weird about backhands like I am will be, because we just don't see single-handed backhands that often on the women's tour. And she's got one. And it's a pretty nice one, you know? I first heard the name at last year's French Open when she won the girls' singles there. And you know, we learned that she was coached by Schiavone as well, which was just a really cool element. You know, one of the great single-handed backhands of the last 20 years or so on the WTA Tour, a French Open champion herself. Like, it was just a cool fit as a coaching partnership. And you know, now we're seeing her at this WTA event, her home event, as you say, and it's just been like the first time I've properly watched her. And you know, I don't know what you think. I think sort of mechanically, the forehand to me looks a little bit like Mukova-esque. You know, it's very wristy. She's got really wrist action on the forehand, and she can create angle off that wing quite well and hit with quite a lot of spin. I think both ground strokes could be in danger of like breaking down against big, heavy power. I know she managed Samsonova today, but Samsonova was wayward for most of this match. I'd be really interested to see how these Tagger ground strokes are going to hold up against, you know, there's a lot of big hitters on the WTA Tour. So that's going to be interesting to watch. But she's young. She can develop. As you said, she's 18. She's tall. She's really tall. And she's got a nice serve. It was really effective for her today, particularly against Samsonova. And I just really like her vibe. Like, she's, as I said, that partnership with Schiavone is cool. Schiavone is, I think, looking seriously cool on the coaching sidelines in her glasses. I think of her as this fiery character when she played, but she's very subdued on the court. I think she probably knows that maybe that's the energy that Tagger needs. There's another coach who's there with them, also speaking in Italian to Tagger on the sidelines. And she's sort of taken the crowd with her on these matches. They've been journeys to get over the line. You know, against Badosa, she served for it twice and got broken and needed a second set tiebreak. And again today against Samsonova, she served for it, got broken. And then, as you said, this absolutely wild tiebreak where Samsonova kept getting set points and kept blowing it. And Tagger herself needed 4 match points, I think, to finish it off. So there's been drama, even though they've been straight sets wins. And yeah, I've just really, really enjoyed watching her, just having my eyes open to this new player who has just a different game style. You just don't see people play like that too much. And what I'd forgotten is that Potapova is now representing Austria as well. So that's who she plays in the quarterfinals. And yeah, there's 2 Austrian flags next to each other. But I have a feeling the crowd are going to be with Tagger in that one.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, isn't it, to see the vibe in that. Whether anybody's confused at all, or whether anybody's sort of decided they're going to try and equal out their support in some way. But I suspect you're right. And that's in the bottom half of the draw, Potapova against Tagger. Then the winner of that will face either Donna Vekic, who's having a good week. She actually had a walkover today, but she had a good first round win. Vekic plays against Karolina Pliskova. So 2 players that have been around for a long time in the bottom half of the draw. I mean, it is a decent draw, isn't it? The top seed in this tournament is Mira Andreeva, and she's at the top of the draw there against Sorana Castella, who's having such a good sort of swan song season. And the winner of Andreeva Castella will face either Yelena Ostapenko or Elena Gabriela Rusa. So yeah, we'll keep a very close eye on that, and I'll be fascinated to see who ends up coming through all of this.
Yeah, I think, you know, the 2, you know, probably the 2 standout players in that draw, I think, are meeting each other in the quarterfinals, you know, in terms of their form this season. Andreeva and Castella, as you said, like that's a big match, I think, in that draw to come in the quarters. And then I think indoor clay is a really good surface for Ostapenko. You know, like it takes out the elements, so it sort of becomes more of a ball striker's court and conditions. And then the clay, we know she likes the clay, and she's got time on the ball. She can wind up, and she played a sort of interesting match against Ayala. You know, she was 5-1 down, I think, in that second set, and got it all the way back to 7-5. Won 6 games in a row. She picked someone out in the crowd and took issue with them and said, "Well, why don't you come and play then?" It was like classic Ostapenko aggro. But that was a good win against Ayala, I think. So yeah, as you said, it is a compelling draw, that one as well.
So that's going on at the same time over the next few days as the Billie Jean King Cup matches, as the teams vie for the opportunity to get to the finals in September, late September, where hosts China are already going to be. 7 ties to be played over the next couple of days, but a lot of players not there. A lot of sort of players lacking, really, particularly I suppose from a Britain perspective. We're familiar with the fact that Britain are going away to Australia, and there's no Emma Raducanu, there's no Katie Bolter, and there's no Sonny Cartel either now. And Talia Gibson is the standout player, really, isn't she? Being played on the John Cain Arena there on the hard court.
Imagine having to go back to the John Cain Arena, David. No wonder it all pulled out.
What's it like, I wonder? So, what stands out for you in these playoffs, Matt? Because I know you're a keen Billie Jean King Cup observer.
Yeah, you're right. Like, there's a lot of ties, like we got this sort of on paper versus what it is in reality. You know, like Kazakhstan, Canada pops off the page. You think, oh, great, that must be Rybakina and Boko. Well, no, it's not. Rybakina was not nominated, was never part of the squad, and Boko withdrew late. So it's like, oh, okay. And then you've got like Italy, Japan. You think, oh, great, Paolini, Osaka. Well, Paolini's there, but not Osaka. You've explained all the people missing from Great Britain. You think Poland, Ukraine. Okay, Svitolina, Świątek. We just had that. That was really interesting. Oh, no, but Świątek's not there. There's that feel to a lot of these ties. You know, maybe one team's got their strong team and one team doesn't. I think the two that really jump out for me are Belgium against USA. You know, it is by no means a full-strength USA team, and yet they have such strength in depth that they can field a sort of C or D team, and it still looked pretty good on paper. And they've got Jovic playing for the first time, which I'm interested in. It's on red clay in Belgium, that tie. We saw her do quite well on the green clay in Charleston last week, but red clay is a different challenge with the movement, I think. And Hayley Baptiste is part of that squad as well for the US. But they're coming up against Belgium, who have Elise Mertens, who's so reliable, good in singles and doubles. I just think that's an interesting tie. There's that kind of minnows versus giants feel to it. Not that Belgium are tennis minnows, because they've had a lot of good players over the years, and especially on the women's side. But compared to the US, I think they will feel like they can do a sort of bit of giant killing there at home. And then the other one is Switzerland-Czechia, which is being played in Switzerland. And this is probably the tie where you've got closest to the strongest teams, I would say. You've got Bencic playing for Switzerland, who's obviously, really helped carry them to that trophy in the past. And Noskova is lining up for Czechia. There's also Buzkova, Valentova, Vondrousova is in the squad. So those are pretty full teams, and I think that's a really compelling tie as well. And either of them going out is going to be kind of a big team missing from the finals.
My eye turns to the tie between Slovenia and Spain in Portorož, Slovenia, because I covered a tie there about 23 years ago against the United States, and Venus Williams was playing in it. Martina Navratilova was in the doubles alongside Lisa Raymond,
Oh, wow.
and I think I'm trying to remember. I think the captain might have been Billie Jean King at the time, but yeah, it was an incredible occasion. Beautiful place, Portorož in Slovenia.
Mm. And the other thing to note from the Billie Jean King Cup this weekend is that they've had a change of format. So
Mm,
it's now mirroring the Davis Cup format, which means that the doubles is in the middle. So it's the first time
right,
I think in Billie Jean King Cup history, or Fed Cup as it used to be, that a live doubles is guaranteed. It's always been the fifth match in these sorts of ties in Billie Jean King Cup, but it's now the middle. So we've got two singles on day one everywhere, and then day two is starting with the doubles. And I think that's a good move. I think we love it when it's a decider. We know that, but I think to have a team competition and not have a guaranteed doubles match has always felt a bit weird to me. So getting that guaranteed and adding that extra dynamic into the tie, I think is a good move, and aligning it with the Davis Cup as well, I think makes sense. So yeah, be interesting to see how that affects some of these ties.
yeah. Well, we'll be back on Monday to bring you up to date with all of these tournaments and, of course, the Billie Jean King Cup matches as well. And we'll be back in part three with a bit more news. Welcome back to part three of the tennis podcast, and just a couple of little bits of news to cover before we sign off for this midweek edition of the show. One of them involving Aryna Sabalenka and her not playing Stuttgart. Matt, when I initially heard that she wasn't going to play, my thought was, oh, well, maybe this is just an extension of her continuing to be a little careful, and not play too many tournaments. And she's done that last summer. She did it in the Middle East swing, having done so well. I sort of thought maybe the fact that she's won the Sunshine Double, she's thinking, look, I care about the Grand Slams ultimately now, but maybe there might be a bit more to it than that.
I don't know. I had the same read on it as you. I mean, she's written in her post on Instagram that she picked up an injury after Miami and hasn't recovered in time. Now, there's absolutely no need necessarily for her to disclose what that injury is, but she didn't. There was an unspecified injury, and I don't know. I read that as it's a sort of scheduling decision, and
Mm,
she's said injury. I hope she's not injured. I really do. But she didn't seem like overly concerned or worried about it in the message. So I sort of took it to mean it probably is a scheduling thing and needing a bit more recovery from the Sunshine Double, and yeah, just sort of targeting the really big events on the clay. I know Stuttgart's a big
mm,
event, but it's only a 500. But she always loses in the final there, doesn't she? She's lost
yeah.
three or four finals, I think, there. She sort of talked about being fed up of not being able to get the Porsche, despite definitely being able to afford a Porsche. So yeah, out of Stuttgart, which is a shame because I was really, I was sort of chomping at the bit to see her on the clay. But we'll have to wait till Madrid, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder whether this is a little bit of a reaction to kind of being criticised by the tournament director in Dubai. I won't tell the truth, which is I want to have a bit of a rest and make sure I'm absolutely fresh for kind of bigger tournaments to come. I think I think it's okay for somebody who's just done the Sunshine Double to say that.
Me
Personally,
too.
as wonderful as the Stuttgart tournament is, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make sure you're fresh physically and mentally and emotionally ahead of big swings to come. You cannot play and win everything. You cannot. You've got to if you're winning all the time, you've got to put some gaps in your schedule. If you're not winning all the time, maybe you do put some more tournaments in. That's the way the calendar is. And listen, maybe she is injured, but I just wonder. And I think she is somebody, even though she bit back at that tournament director and said, I may well not play that event again if they're going to talk to me. I do think she's quite sensitive to criticism like that. You know, we've heard her mention a lot of times she's not going to get herself in the position she was with post Roland Garros again. Yeah. You know, and she hears things, she follows things, and I just wonder. I mean, I don't know that for sure. That's just my suspicion, but I think it's really smart if she is deciding to remove tournaments from her calendar to be fresh and mentally and physically. I think she's got a heck of a lot better chance of winning these big tournaments. You know, if I think of her removing what she did from her summer last year, she went and won the US Open. She didn't play the Middle East, she went and won the Sunshine Double. I tell you, if she's being careful ahead of the French Open and Wimbledon, just makes me feel more likely that she goes and wins those things. So we shall see. One player who is definitely planning to play an event that I'm a little bit surprised that he's playing this soon is Holger Rune. And he's announced that he's going to play the Hamburg tournament, which starts on the 16th of May. Now, I'll be delighted if he's fully fit and able to play and doesn't have any adverse reaction, and good for him. He clearly loves the sport. He's working incredibly hard and he's making it very clear that he's putting in the work with a lot of the posts that he's put out. And he's made it very clear how desperately he misses the tour. I just hope, Matt, that he's not taking a chance here and rushing it back too soon. I can't know. But an Achilles rupture is such a serious injury that I hope he's not taking any chances.
Yeah, I haven't got a lot to add, really. Far be it from me to, to say that I know the state of his recovery, and I have to hope and trust that he has good people around him who are not pushing it too much, and that he is ready. But it makes me a bit worried. When he first did that injury, I remember a lot of experts saying US Open next year, could be a good target for a return, but the chance of him coming back for the clay and the grass just didn't seem right. And it's going to be 7 or 8 months since he did that injury when he makes his return. Yeah, I just really hope that this isn't too much too soon. He doesn't end up setting himself further back. But as I said, I don't have any inside information on that. Just from the outside, it just makes me a little concerned.
Well, good luck, Holger. It's a horrible injury he's had, and we wish him well for sure. And we will follow that with interest when it does eventually happen, as we will follow the next few days of tennis with great anticipation as well, because I think we're in for a cracking end to these tournaments that are coming up, and we will be back with Catherine. Catherine will be rejoining us on Monday for the show to look back on Monte Carlo and Linz and the Billie Jean King Cup, and ahead to whatever else is coming up in the clay court season as well. We have our mascots. Catherine has Bodie. I have Maisie, who I understand from owner Tom was having the time of her life in Charleston recently.
Of course,
big Charleston tournament fan. So hello, Maisie. Matt has his mascot, Roger. We have our top folks and executive producers and all-round great blokes, Greg, Chris and Jeff. We are partnered with The Athletic and part of the Athletic Podcast Network, and do go and have a read of the stuff that's on The Athletic at the moment. It's so fascinating to read the depth of coverage that they have there, and the features and the great angles. We lap it up, and I'm sure you will too. And Matt, we will be back in a few days' time. So have a good couple of days watching tennis, and enjoy all of that, and rejoin us for the next tennis podcast. We'll see you then.